When I opened the door that day, I never expected to find my entire life turned upside down. In that moment, I froze, and my world shattered into pieces. I had always believed I was living a love story written in the stars, a fairy tale where my husband and I were meant to be together forever, two souls so deeply connected that nothing could ever tear us apart. I met him when I was just 21, a shy literature student who believed more in fictional romances than real ones. And he came into my life like a summer storm, sudden, overwhelming, and impossible to resist. He would wait for me outside the library with wildflowers, surprise me with handwritten letters slipped into my notebooks, and promise under the moonlight that he would always protect me from every hurt the world could ever throw my way. My parents adored him, my friends envied our chemistry, and in every mirror I looked into, I saw the reflection of a woman deeply loved, deeply wanted. After we married, we moved into a sunlit house on a quiet street lined with cherry blossom trees, and every morning he would kiss my forehead and say, "You're my forever, my only truth," before leaving for work. I dedicated my life to him, turning down job offers, sacrificing my dreams, believing that supporting his rising career and building a family was my only destiny. But slowly, tiny cracks began to appear, almost invisible at first, like hairline fractures in glass. He began staying out late, blaming work meetings that always seemed to end past midnight, and when he came home, there was a strange scent on his clothes, a soft floral perfume I had never worn. His eyes started to drift away during dinner conversations, his hands absent-mindedly scrolling through his phone while I spoke about my day, and the warmth that once wrapped around our hearts began to cool into an icy silence. One rainy evening, I decided to surprise him during a business trip. I booked a last-minute flight, telling myself that maybe all he needed was a spark, a reminder of the woman who had given up her entire world for him. I rehearsed my lines on the plane, imagining his joyful shock, his teary eyes, his arms pulling me into a kiss that would melt away all my doubts. But when I arrived at his hotel, I felt my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird desperate to escape. I asked the receptionist for his room number using the sweet, trembling voice of a devoted wife, and she handed me a spare key without a second thought. As I stood in front of the door, I took a deep breath, adjusting my hair and smoothing down my dress, my mind painting romantic images of his surprised smile. But the moment I turned the key and stepped inside, my entire universe collapsed in on itself. There, tangled in the hotel bed sheets, sleeping peacefully, was not just my husband, but my best friend, the woman who had stood beside me on my wedding day, holding my veil, whispering promises of sisterhood and loyalty into my ear. My knees buckled, my throat closed up, and a scream rose inside me so loud it threatened to tear apart my very soul. I felt my body go numb, my fingers trembling as I covered my mouth, trying to process the grotesque betrayal laid out before me. Every memory flashed in rapid, painful bursts, her laugh echoing through my kitchen, the way she held my baby niece, her hand brushing against my husband's arm accidentally at family gatherings. All the small moments that suddenly felt sinister and calculated. My mind spiraled into a dark abyss, drowning in images of their secret touches, whispered plans, stolen moments that happened while I waited at home, believing he was building our future. I wanted to wake them, scream, throw every piece of furniture, tear apart the sheets that carried their scent, but something inside me snapped differently that day, not with rage, but with a cold, eerie calm. Instead of confronting them, I turned and stepped out quietly, closing the door behind me like sealing a coffin. I stood in the hallway, my heart shattering in silent screams, and I realized in that chilling moment that the woman I had trusted more than my own shadow had been weaving this web of deception right under my nose, that my husband, the man I thought was my destiny, had been feeding me lies sweeter than honey but deadlier than poison. I staggered back to the elevator, my fingers gripping the cold railings as if they were the only things keeping me from dissolving into dust. As the elevator descended, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my mascara smudged, my lips trembling, but behind the ruin was a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, a seed of wrath, a hunger for truth, for revenge. I checked into another room in the same hotel, my mind whirling with 1,000 thoughts, piecing together every little clue I had ignored in my blind devotion. I ordered wine, sat in the dark, and listened to my own ragged breathing echo in the silence like the prelude to a storm. At that moment, I knew I couldn't let them know that I had found out. No, this was bigger than a single confrontation, bigger than a one-time scream. I needed to plan, to make them feel the same suffocating betrayal, to let them taste the poison they had been feeding me for years. The next day, I went back home as if nothing had happened. I cooked his favorite dinner, set the table, lit candles, and when he arrived, I greeted him with a gentle kiss on his cheek. He looked at me with those same deceitful eyes, and I saw the flicker of guilt hidden behind his practiced smile. My best friend came over later that week, carrying a box of pastries and a rehearsed smile, acting like the perfect friend she had always pretended to be. We sat together sipping tea, and I watched her every movement, every nervous flick of her eyes, every tremor in her voice. She thought she had won, that she had stolen my life and my love, but little did she know that I was documenting everything. Secret recordings of our conversations, copies of his texts, hidden cameras I had placed in our house, all building toward the day I would expose them so thoroughly that their entire world would crumble beneath them. Every night I lay beside him, feeling his breathing, his heartbeat, wondering how many lies were hidden behind each gentle touch. I pretended to sleep deeply while he slipped out to call her, thinking I was too naive to know. But in those moments I was wide awake, my mind weaving an intricate revenge so devastating it would echo through every breath they took from that day forward. My days turned into rehearsals for a performance they didn't know they had been cast in, and I played my role flawlessly. The loving wife, the clueless friend, the quiet, soft-hearted woman. But inside, I was reborn into something colder, sharper, stronger. I started visiting a lawyer, a discreet investigator, and an old friend who worked in cybersecurity. Slowly, piece by piece, I built a file that could ruin them both, socially, financially, and emotionally. Every receipt, every photo, every voice recording became a weapon, a needle in the heart of their elaborate fantasy. While they laughed together behind my back, thinking they had orchestrated the perfect betrayal, I orchestrated my masterpiece, a silent opera of vengeance waiting for its grand reveal. The day I would strike was not decided yet. I wanted them to be comfortable, to believe they had won completely, to drop their guard and taste the illusion of their victory as sweetly as possible. Because when the blade finally fell, it would not just cut. It would shatter every illusion they had carefully built, turn every moment of their joy into ashes in their mouths, and leave them standing naked in front of the world they had deceived. And as I moved through each day, my smiles turned softer, my voice warmer, my eyes more loving, so they wouldn't suspect the storm gathering behind my calm exterior, so they wouldn't hear the echo of their doom in the quiet spaces between our words, so they wouldn't sense the cold steel of my resolve slicing through the fog of their lies. And while they laid together thinking they had stolen my life, they had unknowingly handed me the keys to their destruction, the map to their darkest fears, and the power to become their worst nightmare. And while the days blurred into nights, and the soft glow of our living room lamps cast gentle halos around the house, I would sit across from him at dinner and study every line on his face, memorizing the curve of his smirk when he lied, the twitch of his fingers when he checked his phone under the table, the careful, rehearsed laughter that echoed through the walls like a ghost of the man I once loved. In those moments, I would imagine the day I would shatter his perfectly built glass world. Imagine the look in his eyes when he realized I had been the silent puppeteer all along. I started leaving small traps, subtle enough to unsettle him, but not enough to reveal my hand. A misplaced earring on the kitchen counter, a lipstick mark on a wine glass he never saw me use, small things that made him pause mid-step, his brows furrowing in the mirror as he adjusted his tie before work. He started coming home earlier, texting me more often during the day, his words overly sweet, sticky with desperation, as if he could sense a shift in the air but didn't know what storm was brewing. Meanwhile, she continued to visit, playing the devoted friend role flawlessly, bringing me flowers and handmade soups when I pretended to be sick, sitting on my couch and telling me about her imaginary love life while my eyes traced the edge of the knife in my hand, imagining for a split second what it would feel like to carve the truth across her painted face. Every night I would light a candle in my room, watch its flame flicker and dance, and whisper to myself the list of their betrayals like a dark lullaby, a chant that hardened my soul and strengthened my resolve. My lawyer, an old university acquaintance who had seen me as a quiet bookworm, looked at me now with cautious respect, perhaps even fear, as he handed me folder after folder of gathered evidence, financial records, phone logs, travel itineraries, secret accounts, enough to bury them both under an avalanche of scandal and shame. My investigator found old college secrets of hers, a scandal she had buried deep, an affair with a married professor, hush money she had accepted to disappear quietly. My cybersecurity friend hacked into their cloud storage, revealing videos, intimate messages, and even recordings of them laughing about how gullible I was, how easy it had been to deceive me. I watched those videos in the dead of night, alone in my study, my fingers pressed against my lips to silence the scream that twisted in my throat, my tears burning lines down my cheeks as I swore to the universe that I would make them regret every breath they took at my expense. I started to rehearse my final move, step by step, each detail more precise than the last. The dinner invitation to all our closest friends and family, the carefully planned seating arrangement so no one would miss the show, the large screen hidden behind elegant drapes, waiting to reveal their filth in the most spectacular fashion. I envisioned the moment the videos would start playing, the room falling into a suffocating silence, gasps echoing off the marble floors, wine glasses slipping from trembling hands, her eyes widening in horror, his face draining of color as he realized the depth of my revenge. I wanted to watch them crumble in real time, to witness their masks peel off under the harsh glare of truth, to taste their humiliation like the sweetest wine on my tongue. But I wasn't done yet. I started writing letters to their workplaces, anonymous tips that hinted at unethical behaviors, slowly poisoning the foundation of their professional reputations. I began donating his clothes to charity without his knowledge, selling his watches online under fake accounts, transferring small sums from our joint account into a hidden fund I had created for my escape. Each small act was a needle in his carefully woven life, each tiny betrayal a silent echo of the 1,000 cuts they had inflicted upon my soul. Meanwhile, I began to rebuild the woman I had lost in the shadows of their deceit. I re-enrolled in my literature program, started attending writing workshops, met old friends I had pushed away to become his perfect wife. I took long walks alone by the sea at dawn, breathing in the salt and feeling my scars transform into armor. The woman staring back at me in the mirror each morning was no longer fragile, no longer desperate for his touch, no longer fooled by empty words and hollow promises. She was reborn in fire and ash, a phoenix shimmering with vengeance and newfound freedom. She had a plan, a purpose, and a storm raging in her eyes that could drown empires. Yet every day I played my role perfectly, greeting him with a soft smile at the door, kissing his cheek as if nothing in the world had changed, while he whispered sweet nothings into my ear, blissfully unaware that each word was carving his own eulogy. I would watch her arrive at our house, her perfume trailing behind her like an omen, her laughter bouncing around my walls like poison-coated arrows. We would sit and share tea, plan weekend getaways, discuss meaningless gossip while I traced the map of my vengeance in my mind, each detail sharper than the last. Sometimes I would catch her glancing at him with hungry eyes, her fingers lingering on his arm a second too long, and I would swallow the bile rising in my throat, smiling so sweetly it would make even the devil weep. They believed they were safe, that they had successfully built their palace of lies on the ruins of my heart, but they had no idea that every smile I gave them was a countdown to their doom, every tender word a blade hidden in velvet. I waited patiently, the days ticking by like drums in a war march, my mind rehearsing every possible outcome, every scream, every shattered dream that would unfold on that final night. And when I closed my eyes at night, I no longer dreamt of our past, no longer longed for his warmth or her sisterly embrace. I dreamt only of the moment I would stand before them, my eyes burning with righteous fury, and watch as the world they had stolen from me turned to dust beneath their feet, as they fell to their knees and begged for a mercy I had buried along with my old self long ago, as I lay there in the darkness, my fingers gripping the edges of my sheets like a lifeline. I could almost hear the echoes of their laughter behind closed doors, the soft moans and hushed giggles that once would have gutted me, but now only fueled the roaring fire within my veins. Each night I sharpened my mind like a blade, replaying every betrayal in my head until they no longer cut me, but turned into weapons I could wield with deadly precision. I began to record small confessionals for myself, video diaries hidden behind encrypted folders, my eyes staring into the lens with a chilling calm, whispering my plans, immortalizing every step so that if I ever doubted myself, I could watch and remember exactly why I was doing this. The world outside kept moving. Neighbors tending to their gardens, children playing on the sidewalks, the sun rising and setting in its silent rhythm. But inside my house, a silent war raged on, invisible to everyone except me. My husband started bringing me small gifts again. Flowers that smelled of cheap apologies, jewelry that glittered with hollow intentions, dinners at fancy restaurants where he would hold my hand too tightly, searching my eyes for clues that I might know, but finding only the sweet, forgiving wife he believed I still was. My best friend, the sister I had chosen before the universe revealed her true face, began texting me late at night, her messages laced with fake concern, checking if I was okay, spinning lies about how exhausted she was from work, how she felt so alone and needed my support. I would reply with warmth, with care, crafting each word like a brushstroke on a masterpiece of deception, while inside I imagined the terror that would flood her eyes when she realized I had always been 10 steps ahead. Meanwhile, I planted rumors in their social circles, subtle seeds of doubt that would sprout into poisonous vines over time. Little by little, I watched their foundation start to crack. A suspicious coworker, an old friend questioning her sudden absences, whispers at parties that made her shift uncomfortably, that made him squeeze my hand a little too hard, as if trying to anchor himself to the illusion slipping away. I would meet with my lawyer at an old cafe near the river, where the sound of water could drown our whispers. We would sip coffee under the soft glow of antique lamps, our papers spread across the table like a general planning a siege. He looked at me now with a mixture of horror and awe, perhaps realizing that the quiet, bookish woman who once blushed at shy compliments had transformed into something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. I rewrote my will, set up secret accounts in my name only, and created a backup plan for every possible twist. I contacted old family members I had lost touch with, weaving them gently back into my life, pretending to rebuild my world while I prepared to tear theirs apart. My husband, sensing some invisible shift, began planning a surprise getaway, a desperate attempt to reel me back into his web. When he showed me the tickets, his voice trembling with forced excitement, I smiled so warmly he almost wept with relief. I kissed his forehead, told him I couldn't wait, all the while imagining how sweet it would be to watch his world burn from the ashes of that planned vacation. And she kept coming over, cooking with me in my kitchen, humming old songs that now sounded like funeral hymns in my ears, her fingers brushing mine as she passed me utensils, her eyes searching for any flicker of suspicion. I gave her none. Instead, I poured her wine, shared inside jokes, and watched as she unknowingly stepped deeper into the labyrinth I had built just for her. Late at night, I would pull out my hidden folder, adding new evidence, connecting each string on my private corkboard, each photograph a nail in their coffin. I kept my phone close, a small device that had turned into my sword, my shield, my confessor. Each screenshot, each recording, each bank transfer was another bead on the rosary of my revenge prayers. I no longer looked at them as humans. They had become characters in the final act of a tragedy I was directing, marionettes dancing helplessly to the music I played. The nights felt endless, the moonlight painting my room in silver streaks as if blessing my silent war, and I would imagine the day of the final dinner, the tension rising like a symphony building to its crescendo, the first clink of glasses, the first forced toast, the first uncomfortable glances when the screen flickered to life behind me. I could almost hear the collective gasp as the first video played, her giggles slicing through the silence like a dagger, his whispers echoing around the room like curses. The guests would shift, their eyes wide with horror, their hands trembling, wine spilling across tablecloths as the slow-motion collapse of their lies unfolded frame by frame. In my mind's eye, I saw her standing up, her face pale as moonlight, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, his hand reaching out in desperation, grasping for me as if I were his lifeline. But I would stand there, untouched, untouchable, my lips curved into a smile sharper than any blade, my eyes burning with the satisfaction of 1,000 suns. I imagined the chaos, family members screaming, friends leaving in disgust, the life they had stitched together so carefully unraveling thread by thread until they stood naked before the world they had deceived. And when the final video ended, when the last word had been spoken, I would raise my glass, my voice calm and clear, and say, "To truth, may it set us all free," before turning and walking out, leaving them to choke on the ashes of their own destruction. But until that day arrived, I continued my dance, each step calculated, each breath measured, each glance a silent promise of what was coming. And every time he held me at night, his arm draped across my waist like a chain, I would stare into the darkness with a fire in my veins, feeling my heart beat stronger than it ever had before, knowing that the woman who had once begged for love was gone forever, replaced by a storm no one could ever contain. As the dawn of that final day approached, the morning sunlight streamed through the curtains like golden blades slicing through the remnants of my old life, illuminating the silent battlefield I had so carefully crafted within the walls of my home, the same walls that had once witnessed my naive love, my quiet sacrifices, my tear-stained pillows, and my whispered prayers for a love that never truly existed. I rose from the bed that morning with a quiet determination pulsing through my veins, my steps light yet heavy with the weight of what was to come, my heart thundering like a war drum echoing across a battlefield littered with the ghosts of every betrayal they had planted in me. I prepared the dinner table with meticulous care, arranging the fine china, polishing the wine glasses until they sparkled like shards of a broken dream, lighting the tall candles that would cast dancing shadows across their guilty faces. As evening fell, they arrived one by one, unaware that tonight their sins would be carved into their souls forever, her laughter filling my hallway like poison-soaked honey, his arm sliding around my waist with that same practiced tenderness that once made me melt. But tonight his touch felt like a final confession echoing in my bones. I welcomed them all with the warmest smile, guiding them to their seats as if I were hosting a fairy tale banquet, each movement smooth and elegant, concealing the hurricane raging beneath my calm surface. When the final guest arrived and the wine was poured, I lifted my glass high and began my speech, my voice strong and smooth like silk hiding a dagger, thanking them for their love and support, describing how blessed I felt to be surrounded by such cherished friends and family, watching their eyes soften with relief, their masks firmly in place, until I turned to the hidden screen and pressed play. The first video flickered to life, and in that single electric moment, the room transformed into a cathedral of gasps and choked screams, her voice echoing in the silence as she whispered his name in ways that sliced through the air like razors, his face contorted in pleasure and deceit, their private world now laid bare beneath the unforgiving light of truth. I watched them both freeze, her wine glass slipping from her hand and crashing to the floor, the red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like fresh blood, his hands trembling as he rose, reaching for me with eyes that pleaded for a mercy I had buried long ago. But I stood unmoved, my heart a fortress, my soul reborn in that firestorm of betrayal. My eyes locked onto his as I slowly placed my wedding ring on the table, the soft clink echoing like a final nail sealing their coffin. I felt no pain, no regret, only an exhilarating liberation flooding my every vein, a divine stillness that rose above their chaos and screams. I turned, my dress flowing behind me like the wings of a vengeful angel, and as I stepped out into the moonlit night, the cool air kissed my face, carrying away the last traces of the woman who had once loved so blindly. I inhaled deeply, feeling the universe wrap around me like a warm embrace, and in that moment I knew that I was finally free, unchained, unstoppable, and as I walked away from the burning ruins of their lies, my spirit soared higher than it ever had, each step echoing with a silent vow. Never again would I kneel before another's love, never again would I beg for scraps of loyalty. From that night on, I would be my own salvation, my own storm, my own universe, and in the echo of their broken sobs behind me, I found my victory, my rebirth, my true beginning.